Welcome to the video presentation on applying for a mini-grant through the Beaver County Educational Trust. This presentation is designed to help applicants complete a quality application. It's critical to understand that only applications receiving the highest scores will actually be awarded a mini-grant. Please pay special attention to the rubric that is provided in your application packet to make sure that you're completing each section of the grant in a manner to receive the highest possible score. The intent of this video will be to look at each section individually and point out some areas of difficulty for folks in the past. Here are a few important things to point out. Your school or district information should only appear on the cover page. The evaluators score each mini-grant application blindly, meaning they don't have any information that indicates the school or the district or the individual who is applying. All that information remains on the cover sheet, and each application is assigned a value or a number. Each evaluator then is evaluating only project 18, for example. We don't know who actually has applied. This is to remove bias. So please make sure your school and district information and no hint to who your school or your district is anywhere in the application other than on the cover page. The deadline for this particular grant is October 16th, and you must submit 10 copies of your application prior to that deadline. The application is to be sent to the Beaver County Educational Trust or to the Beaver Valley Intermediate Unit, and you must submit 10 hard copies. Failure to do that by the deadline actually results in immediate disqualification. Unfortunately, for those scenarios, the evaluators actually won't even know that you've applied. So let's break the application down a little bit and talk about the project title. It's important when you're completing the project title to make sure you do not include your school or district name in the title, because that title is going to show up on every page of the application, and we want to make sure that we're giving no hint to the evaluators as to which district or which school is applying, or even which individual. So nothing in your project title should give away the entity or the name of the person providing or applying. Let's look at program need. It's really critical. I cannot stress it enough throughout the completion of this application. Please make sure you are looking at the rubric. The rubric very clearly explains how to receive the right number of points or the highest possible number of points for each section of the application. In order for you to receive the highest program need, or points for program need, your need should be tied to a student achievement, there should be data that supports this need, and that finally you want to make sure to get the highest possible score that the data you've identified that's tied to student achievement can actually be supported by research. That's not always possible, so you may not be eligible to get 3 points, but in order to get 3 points you need to have student achievement in your need, you need to have data that supports that, and it needs to be found in research. Let's look at some examples to better clarify. In this first example, the applicants received a 0. We need equipment to give students the opportunity to play tennis inside. This program need does not have any ties to student achievement. It doesn't say anything about what students will achieve as a result of this program. So there's nothing about student achievement. It's not tied to data anyway, and there's no research, so it's a 0. In order to get a 1, though, you can have a program need that talks specifically about a need for students as it is tied to student achievement. So looking at this example, students who are physically active perform better on standardized tests and are more engaged in class. Clearly about making sure students are engaged and increasing their achievement. Physical activity in the winter months is challenging. We have a need to improve our indoor activities and wish to implement an indoor tennis program. That's a 1 because it's tied to student achievement. There's a clear need and it's tied to student achievement. If you want to take take it further and get those 2 points, you want a clear need tied to student achievement that has actual data. So in this particular example, we've added to the prior example that we've noticed a trend in our NWEA assessment scores. They dropped during the winter months and bound back in the spring months. So we've added data to this example. And then finally, in example number 3, or to get 3 points, we've added research. A 2001 California Department of Education study correlates school performance with maintaining physical activity during the school day. So we've established that there's research that says students who are more physically active perform better during the school day. We've also noticed that our NWA scores drop during the winter months, and that we know getting physical activity in the winter months can be sometimes challenging. So we have a need to improve the indoor activities that are available within our school, so we would like to implement an indoor tennis program. That's how you get a 3. Please note student achievement does not necessarily have to relate back to test scores. When we're talking about student achievement, it's about what students will achieve. So achievement could be about healthier lifestyles. Really, the possibilities are endless. I don't want folks to think it has to be tied to test scores, but there needs to be data, and it needs to be something students are going to accomplish or achieve. And if you can find research to support that, that's even better. So let's take a look at student objectives here. I almost did the same thing I want you to avoid, which is, say, student objectives. These objectives are about the program. What are the objectives of the program? What are you intending to do by implementing this program? Not what are students going to do. Let's make sure that we're clear by looking at the different examples. During bad winter days, students will participate in indoor tennis so they maintain healthy habits and perform better in school. Well, this particular objective looks like it's tied to student achievement, so you might be asking yourself, why is there a 0? Well, it's a 0 because it's a student objective. You must have program objectives in order to receive any points at all. This particular objective doesn't state anything about what the program will do. It's what the students will do. So let's look at getting a 1. Implementation of an indoor tennis program will increase the opportunities for students to be physically active in the winter months. All right, now we have a program objective. We don't have it tied to any student achievement. We don't have any tied to data, anything of that nature, but we have an objective related to the program. What will the program do? That's what we're looking for, so you would get a 1. If you would like to receive a 2, you want that need to be tied to student achievement. So implementation of an indoor tennis program will increase opportunities for students to be physically active in the winter months and enable students to be better engaged during classroom instruction. So now I've said, what is the program going to do and how is it tied to increasing student achievement? You want a 3. In order to get a 3, we still want we still want a good objective for the program, what that program is going to do to help improve student achievement, and is it measurable? So if we look at this particular objective, implementation of an indoor tennis program will raise opportunities for students to be physically active in the winter months, increase student engagement during instruction, and result in increased NWA assessment scores by 10%. Clearly, that is a measurable objective, that's a program objective, and it is also detailing a connection to student achievement. So now let's talk about evaluation. When we're talking about evaluation, we're asking that you want to determine or share with us how you plan to evaluate the effectiveness of your actual program. How are you going to know that this program is effective? Let's look at some examples. Teachers will observe whether or not students like playing tennis indoors. That's more of an objective than an actual evaluation. How are you evaluating the program? So that would be a 0. In order to evaluate show that you evaluate the program, you need to do something with the information you're gathering. So let's look at number 1. Students will be asked to complete a survey about indoor tennis and whether or not they like it. The survey data will be summarized. So in this particular case, we have a plan to evaluate the effectiveness of the program. We're going to ask students to complete surveys, and we're going to summarize that data and take a look at it. The problem is, it's not at all tied to the program objectives. The objective was not about making sure students liked tennis, but rather it was about increasing student engagement because we were increasing their physical activity. So while this is a plan to evaluate, it's not a plan to evaluate based on the objectives. So you want to make sure you tie it to the objectives. Here's how you'd get a 2. Teachers will complete 3 surveys during bad winter days. These perception surveys will indicate student focus and engagement in the lessons prior to and after physical activity. In this case, indoor tennis. Survey results will be summarized. So clearly, we're gathering some data, we're going to take a look at that data, and the data we're gathering is tied directly to the original program objectives. That's how I get a 2. If I want to get a 3, I have to have clear expectations for what I want the data to look like for me to say it's successful or the program is successful. So we would do the same surveys, same perception surveys, focusing on engagement in lessons prior to and after physical activity. And we'll summarize that data, but the expectation is that average NWEA scores from the fall will be compared to average NWEA scores in the winter. An increase of 10% would indicate the program was successful. That's how you get a 3 on program on program evaluation. A few other key points would be noting the timetable. Your project needs to be completed by May 7th, and you want to make sure that your project description is so clear that the evaluators can actually visualize what's going to happen. So make sure it's clear and concise so that we're really understanding what your project intends to do. In order to receive full points, you'll want to make sure that you make a connection to the community. But if you take a look at your rubric, you'll see that. There are some expectations of the Beaver County Educational Trust, and your application should explain how you intend to meet those expectations. The Beaver County Educational Trust has an expectation to encourage creativity, increase student engagement in learning, and develop active learners or lifelong learners. How does your project help in one or more of those ways? The more of those ways you address, the greater the points you receive. You'll get 1 point for each of the aforementioned, up to 3 possible points. Go ahead and take a look at your rubric to be sure. Increasing the visibility of the Beaver County Educational Trust is another thing you'll need to address in your application. Be sure to explain how you can help increase the visibility of the Beaver County Educational Trust. The more visible they are in the community, the more money they receive in donations from the community, the more mini grants they can actually put out to schools the following year. So some ways you could do that would be to write about it in a newsletter, include stickers on the equipment or materials that you purchase that say thanks to Beaver County Educational Trust. Something of that nature, or you could distribute a flyer at a culminating event that talks about the Beaver County Educational Trust and what they've done to help you with this particular project. When you're completing your budget, it's important that you remember a few things, all of which are detailed in the guidelines at the front of the application. The grant cannot fund salaries, speakers, a number of other things. You want to make sure that you look at that at the front of the grant. You also want to be sure your purchases are in line with the program objectives. So if you're talking about implementing a program on tennis, you're certainly not buying soccer balls, for example. And then you also need to note that food cannot exceed more than 20. We look forward to reviewing your applications and are hopeful we'll be receiving really strong applications.